Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive. This week, I continue my series talking about the Pantheons in Scion 2nd Edition's core book, Hero, by talking about the Netjer of Egypt. Now, as with all of these, I'm trying to bring in what I know from outside of the book as a form of perspective. This week, I'm not really going to be talking about the stories per se, because the Netjer, it's more about understanding the nature of an individual deity. And I have a couple that I'm going to talk about, as well as talk about all the mechanical stuff. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we talk about the Egyptian Pantheon, the Netjer. In the Egyptian Pantheon, the big damn deal god is Ra, or Amun, or Amun-Ra, or Re, or Atum-Re, or many, many other names. There's a scholarly debate on whether these are all just renaming the same deity, whether it's merging and swapping the names of different similar deities, or a whole number of things. But ultimately, Ra is the sun god, and he goes through the sky in a beautiful bark every day. And then at night, he descends into the underworld, where the first half of the night, he faces a range of different threats, culminating between midnight and 1 a.m. with battling Apophis, or Apep, depending on which name you prefer. The giant snake that seeks to devour the sun, that it may never rise again. And then after that, everything turns into a nice, relaxing, pleasant journey as Ra is beginning his ascent from the underworld. And then he gets reborn into the world to go through the sky again, with a scarab on his face. Yeah. That's a thing. But ultimately, this is the thing. Many different deities in the Pantheon are at different points in the night performing specific jobs defending Ra. And then, the most important part, Ra is being defended by Set. It is Ra and Set who face Apep or Apophis, whichever you prefer. And that is important. That's a lot of people, and we're now segueing into this, a lot of people think Set is a evil deity. He's not. He's the god of the desert. And this means he's a brutal deity, but he's a survivor. And he's also, like the desert, fickle, prone to changing moods, sudden death. And, well, that's what happened to poor Osiris. But we're not really going to talk about Osiris. I mean, everyone knows the story of Osiris being chopped into bits, thrown down the Nile, and Set, or Isis, putting all his pieces back together again but not being able to find the phallus, so going to who I'm going to talk to next, Hetheru or Hathor, about the assistance in making one. And this is where we talk about Hathor. Hathor is another one of those interesting conundrum type deities from the Netjer. Alright, so first off, let's take this bit. Archaeologists have found some similarities that connect Hetheru, aka Hathor, to the same deity as Aphrodite, namely Ishtar. There's a number of trade links and at the origin points symbolic similarities that a lot of scholars are thinking that Ishtar, early Aphrodite, and Hathor were all the same deity, just seen from slightly different cultures. I.e., that there's a common point of origin either at Ishtar or before the three. But Hathor is a very interesting deity. She is a sky goddess. She's connected with the sun disk. In fact, it's in her more cow-like aspects in some depictions, or even in her human aspects, she's always shown with the arc of a sun disk above her head. And it's kind of funny. In the Scion book, it actually makes a comment that when Hetheru is operating in the world now, she looks simultaneously as the most attractive woman a person could behold, and as the most matronly woman a person could encounter. Having met an actual priestess of Hathor, I'm gonna say I can totally see this. It makes a whole lot of sense, because that's exactly what the priestess I met actually looked like to my mind's eye. But when you talk about Hathor or Hetheru, you're dealing with an interesting deity, because she's, on one hand, she's got close relations in some way or another with multiple members of the Egyptian Pantheon, and at the same time is mother to most of the Egyptian Pantheon. Egyptians were funny that way. But at the same time, you're talking about someone who's, on one hand, is seen as nurturing and a fertility and icon and such like that. And on the other hand, you're talking about a deity linked with occasionally sacred prostitution. And so whenever you're dealing with Hetheru, you're dealing with something that's two sides of a very primal coin. Now, the main virtues of the Netjer, at least as depicted in Scion 2nd edition, are balance and justice. Balance is more the, everything in its place. Everything does like it's supposed to. Nothing is too much, nothing is too little. The Nile floods when it has to provide fertile soil, and it doesn't flood more than it needs to, because that would wash away the plants. Second flood was actually something considered a bad omen, because it washed away the crops. Justice is, well, let's look at it like this. When you die and you go into Duat, to go into their underworld, you go to a place called the Hall of Two Truths. And there, your heart is weighed to see if it's not too heavy, not too light. It must exactly match Ma'at's feather. Ma'at being a entity of truth and justice, a judging entity. And your heart has to weigh exactly the weight of Ma'at's feather, or it gets eaten and you go into annihilation. If it weighs that correct amount, you get to go into the reed fields. But that's the thing. This whole concept is about justice. Your heart is weighed down by your sins, by the wrong deeds you have performed in life. At the same time, the Netjer will tend to keep their word. They will tend to, do right things in the world. You have to remember, the Book of the Dead has a whole list of things that you're supposed to say you didn't do. I didn't lie. I didn't break my word, etc., etc. And these are sort of the things that go towards the Netjer's sense of justice. Now, what is the greatest weakness of the Netjer? That's fun. You see, at some point, every deity has been given credit for the same thing. I mean, it's Heteru is sometimes bearing the mantle of Sekhmet, even though Sekhmet is a totally separate deity. And different deities share different roles, and it's all a big, complicated mess that's really, really Byzantine to sort out what deity truly, specifically does what thing. I mean, there's like 3 different fertility deities. Yeah, that's... Their weakness is basically they all have so much interlap because of mantles swapped and shared and such over the millennia. And they kind of tend to get a little bit political with each other, trying to get the best jobs or best things for themselves, while while making one of their rivals look a little worse. And of course, if you're a Scion of the Netjer, you're probably going to get pulled into these sort of squabbles. Ultimately, with regards to the other Pantheons, they are closest to the Theoi of Greece, mostly because the Greco-Roman gods are from the same basic area. There's a lot of similarities between them. And, oh yeah, there was a brief period where the Theoi got kicked out of Olympus and kind of laid low in the realms of the Netjer. The Netjer tend to not let the Theoi forget about that period. The Netjer also kind of get along well with the Teotl of the Aztecs. And it's mostly just because there's a greater number of commonalities between them. There's a greater respect of the sun among the Teotl. Or as the Netjer put it, the Teotl have a proper respect for the sun. With regards to the Aesir, only Set and Loki from the Aesir actually interact. For the most part, the Netjer don't interact with the Aesir. Though Set and Loki are good friends. Kind of scary when you think about it. But that is the Netjer. Next week, I will be talking about the Orisha of Yoruba land. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.